Hello, a very good day to every one of you. So today I'm going to discuss about sampling. So when I talk about sampling here, this is referred to research. So when we need to conduct a research, basically we will need to have data. And data are divided into primary data and secondary data. So for today's purposes, I'm referring to primary data collections. So first of all, what is sampling and why do we need to have sampling? So sampling here basically is a process of selecting a smaller group of people, item or cases from a large population that you would like to study. So reason for sampling here is simply because the first one, when we have sampling, it is more practical because it saves resources in terms of time and money. And secondly, when we are doing sampling, it is more efficient because it's allowed the data collection from large population. And the third reason here is because it is more accurate. Generally, a well-designed sample will able to reduce bias and also avoid error that potentially arise from too many subjects. Okay, the fourth reason here is when we are doing sampling, it enables generalization. So most of the time when we are conducting research, we are collecting a sample from the large population with the reason that we want to infer the sample to the large population. So based on all these reasons, so sampling is always conducted. So how does the sampling process look like? Generally, it look like this. So first, we must have a target population. So through the target population, we will have the sampling frame. So from the sampling frame, we draw the sample and then we collect the data. So then that is the overall sampling process. So now I'm going to lead you to the step in conducting sampling. So overall, there are 6 steps here. So the first step here is we need to identify the target population. And the second step here is to determine the availabilities of the sampling frame. And the third step here is to select the sampling strategy and followed by the fourth step to determine the sampling technique. So after the fourth step, the next thing we need to do here is to determine what is the sample size that we are looking at and finally select the actual sample unit and there we go to collect the data, right? So let's look at the first step. So when we say identify the target population, so the target population here will be the research topic that defined by you as the researcher or what are you trying to investigate in this study. And usually this target population here will have an understanding of who or what is the interest of your core topic or your study. So after identifying the target population, the next thing we need to establish here is whether is the sampling frame available. So basically sampling frame here refer to the source of material or all the information set required in the sample. So this sampling frame here will consist a list of records of all the population's element. So once this has been established, then we will move on to the next phase. But I will have to say that there is often an issue with the problems with sampling frame. So most of the time, we do not have a complete list of sampling frame, and maybe sometimes we do have it, but it is outdated. And sometimes another issue here is too inclusive list and inappropriate list. So I have to share with you my experience. Most of the time in our social science research, like my area of study, organizational behavior, which often involve the employee, the sampling frame is most of the time not available. So with that, right, then I have to move on to the next approach. Okay, but you just stay tuned. Let me explain. So after we determine the sampling frame, so the next thing we need to do here is the sampling strategy. So overall, the sampling strategy here refer to what is the plan that you're going to move forward to choose or pick your sample. So in this case here, for the sampling strategy here, we can divide that into two, which is probability sampling, where we have random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, and cluster sampling. As for non-probability sampling, here we have convenience sampling, purposive sampling, some call that as a judgmental sampling, quota sampling, and also snowball sampling. So after we determine the sampling strategy, then the next thing we're going to do here is to decide on the sampling technique. So assuming that you have chosen non-probability sampling, so for non-probability sampling, we have 4 categories here. You're going to choose based on the sampling technique that applies to your study. And obviously, the next one here, probability sampling technique, we consist this list here based on the objective of your study, right? So after we determine the sampling technique, the next thing here is how large is the sample size that we need to have. So overall, if we talk about generalizability, the larger the sample, of course, will give you a better result. But most of the time, it will depend on whether is the populations that you are investigating in having a large variance. So if there is a large variance, then of course we need to increase the sample size. But maybe today we just look into what are the steps when we are doing into the sampling method in terms of determining the sample size for quantitative study. So one of the approach we can use here is you can go online and search for sample size calculator. So when you click into all these sample size calculator available online, you have to configure the parameters that you are looking at. So based on your objective of your research and the nature of your study. And then another approach that we can use here will be following a statistical rule that is by the desired ratio of sample size to the construct number item. So then it should be 20:1 ratio. So this is according to Hare and colleagues in 1998. So other than that, right, we can also go on the approach of the argument by researcher such as Koch and Hadaya 2018, and we can also use this what we call the G power analysis. So this is most of the time that we can use for our quantitative study if you are going for non-probability sampling. So for non-probability sampling, like just now I mentioned that non-probability sampling usually happen when the sampling frame is not available. Okay, how about our friends who have the sampling frame? So if you have the sampling frame, right, then you can refer to Crutchy and Morgan table. So then based on the population, and then this is the desired sample size that you're supposed to collect. All right. So then that is about determining the sample size. Now, just now I mentioned that assuming that you would like to look into the sample size by using G power analysis, so you can download the particular software, but this software is free and you can available to everyone. So for today purposes, I'm not able to go through in details with you. So, but these are the steps for us to do the power analysis using G power analysis, right? So these are some of the steps, and if you have the time, you can also go through the video that I have created as to how to calculate the sample size using G power software. So now I move on to the next part for determining the sample size, assuming that you are doing a qualitative study. So for qualitative study, the rule of thumb that we follow here is data saturation. So data saturations happen when the researcher already reached a point where there is no more information is obtained from further data. So that will be the time that you need to stop proceeding with the interview or participant observation or whatever technique that you are using for your qualitative study. So overall, there are some suggestions and guidelines by past researcher. So according to Guest and a colleague in 2006, if you have a population that is very homogeneous, most of the time 12 in-depth interview, you will reach to the data saturations. On the other hand, assuming that your population is fairly heterogeneous, then you will need to have 25 to 30 interview in order to reach the data saturations point. Yes, you are right. Now we have done 5 steps already. So now we move on to the last step here, which is to select the actual sampling unit. So you already have your targeted population. You already decided on the sampling frame. Then you decided on the sampling technique you have done in the sample size calculation. So now we have to select the actual sampling unit. So the sampling unit can be varied based on your research objective and also the topic that you are doing. Some of the data here we are supposed to collect from individual, perhaps like my field of study, organizational behavior. My unit of analysis most of the time are employees. So there are also in other situations. So for instance, you want to look into that organization technology adoptions, right? So then in this case, your unit of analysis here supposed to be an organization or a company or an enterprise. So then that will be the actual units that you are collecting your responses for. Okay, so for today's purposes, right, so I have covered what is sampling, why do we need to have sampling, and what are the steps to proceed with the sampling process. Okay, thank you for watching.